Hello, I'm looking for someone to join me in an adventure. So as promised, here is my second paint video of the week for Wizard Week. And today we're going to be tackling Saruman the White, the leader of the Order of the Wizards. And he's also leader of the White Council, which is the particular model I'm using that came out way back in, I think it was 2006. Came out in a White Council box set, which included quite a few models, most of them new sculpts and new characters, and was a bargain price of 20 quid, but I paid just over £20 for just this one model, so it shows how much it's gone up in value, and he is actually a rather rare sculpt. The more common ones are the sort of one leaning on his staff and the one with the palantir. But I've got the awesome one where he's sort of mid-casting, so it's a really nice dynamic pose, which is a bit of a change for most wizards in Middle-earth, which are very static looking. So while white is in the name, we don't actually use a lot of white. Instead, we're going to be using a lot of ivories and bones and greys for our model. So I've primed my model with desert sand from Coloured Forge, and I've given it a coat of Zandri dust just in case of any slip-ups. And with that said, let's head to the table and we'll start painting Saruman the White, ready to add to our force to face off the Necromancer. So here the model is that I'll be painting, and it's that classic Saruman from the White Council, where he's got his staff held out in a sort of casting pose. And yeah, he's a really awesome model, one of my favourite poses of Saruman. And was I happy to pay the £20? Yeah, seeing as I've in the past seen this guy go for close to 30. So yeah, really happy to pick this guy up, and he is getting rarer. I mean, I know we do have the plastic Saruman, but I don't think he's anywhere near as cool looking as this one. The only closest one to this is, I think, the battle at Orthanc, where he is dueling Gandalf, and they're both kind of in a similar staff thrusting forward pose. But yeah, this is easily my favourite one. So, first colour we're going to need is Rakoff Flesh, and we're going to be dry brushing this heavily over the entire model. So we can be quite liberal. It's almost an overbrush, as we're wanting to really apply this to the model, but leaving the darkest recesses the Zandri dust. So onto our model, and we want to dry brush this quite heavily. I think I've actually removed too much paint, but that's fine. We'll slowly build up layers on just his robes if we can. We'll avoid his hair and face, as we'll be painting those later on with different colours. So there we go, we've got a good thick dry brushing there with Rakoff Flesh. And yeah, we can just about make out Zandri dust in the very dark recesses, which is just what we wanted. So next up we're going to do a couple of shades. First off, we're going to do an all over shade with Seraphim Sepia, which as you can see I barely have any left of. And then we're going to do a select recess shading, focusing on the darkest, deepest parts of the robes with some Agrax Earthshade. So let's just hope this lasts. It should do. We need to get a single layer over the entire model. So we'll add a little bit of water, hopefully make it go a bit further. And so we can apply this all over the robes of Saruman, staining it a nice sort of yellow colour. So there we go, Seraphim Sepia has now dried, and we're ready to do a focused wash. So we're going to use Agrax Earthshade and a nice narrow brush. so that we can put this straight into the recesses. So we're looking for the very darkest folds, so right on the inside here. We actually want to apply this all the way around his band on his waist. And other dark recesses like the inside of his sleeves. And anywhere else we got deep folds. So there we go, the Agraxar shade has dried in those dark recesses, but it has darkened down the entire model. So we're going to brighten that back up with a couple of dry brushes, and we're going to go back to our base dry brush of Rackar Flesh. We'll be a little bit more lighter on the application this time around. So we'll get some prepared on our brush again, working off most of it this time. And onto Saruman, we're going to gently catch the more raised folds and larger flat surfaces with this dry brush. And once that's done, we're going to go in with our second dry brush, this time Flagrant Flesh. And again, a nice light dry brush, trying to pick out the more pronounced areas. Building up that pale cream and ivory sort of colour Saruman's robes actually are. So onto our model. Might want to build this up in a couple of layers again, just to get a nice smooth transition. Once we're done, we just got one little colour left to do and the robes are finished. There we go, starting to look pretty nice. So our last colour is to go in Powder Witch Flesh, and this is for an edge highlight on all the highest raised bits of the robe. So we'll get some of this prepared on our palette. So not dry brushing this time, we're actually going in with a thin brush, applying this as a gentle edge highlight. Thin it out quite thin, just so it's not too overpowering, as it can be if on the wrong types of colours. So once we're not too overloaded, I'll bring in Saruman and we'll get some of the sharp folds. And we can use the edge of our brush, if not we'll use the tip, just like in here. And there we go, that is the robes on Saruman complete. but he's far from finished. So we'll prepare our next set of colours, which we're going to focus on his face. So we'll need skins and his hair, so we'll need our greys and whites. So we'll start on the skin, so we've got his face and hands to pick out, and we'll go in with Cadian Flesh Tone as our base colour. So making sure we're not too overloaded with our brush, we can go in picking out his face, including his mouth behind his beard there, and we've got his hands, being careful around the robes. Don't worry about getting it on the staff at this point, as we'll be painting that next. And once our skin is dry, we can go in with a shade of Reichland Flesh Shade, just to help tone down the pink on the face and give it some depth. So we won't want a lot, as we've only got a few small areas to do. So we'll pick out the hands, getting it in between the fingers, and of course his face, working it into the recesses of his eyes, nose, mouth, etc. Once the Reichland Flesh Shade's dry, we're going to go back in with some Cadian Flesh Tone and just reaffirm the higher pieces, more visible areas. Forehead, nose, cheekbones, the tops of his fingers here. And finally, we're going to go in with Kislev Flesh, and this is just to pick out the highest points, so the likes of his nose, the higher parts of his fingers where the light will catch. So just pick out bridge of his nose, highest parts of his fingers here, highest part of his forehead, and there we go, your face is finished. Now we can move on to the beard. So our first colour for the beard is going to be Dawnstone. So we'll get a nice base coat of this down, then we'll shade it down and highlight it with a couple of lighter colours. So we got a little bit of his hair and beard coming down underneath his staff. So don't forget to get that. We got the rest of it here, and we got his long hair. Once the Dawnstone's dry, we're going to shade it down with a little bit of Nuln Oil. Don't want too much again, just so it doesn't go out of control, as we want to try to avoid all the areas we've completed, so the skin and robes. So just gently apply this to the grey, letting it settle. In those recesses. Now that the Nuln Oil is dry, we can come in with Administratum Grey as our first highlight colour. So we need to try and focus this on the raised areas of the hair. We'll use the side of our brush where we can, but we'll probably need to use the tip of our brush for quite a lot of the work. So make sure you have a nice thin point to your brush and thin your paint down enough so it flows quite freely, but not too runny. So onto Saruman, we're going to pick out raised strands of hair. Don't forget to get his eyebrows as well. One of the few models with actual eyebrows, which is quite nice. Especially seeing as they are quite an important part of his character. There we go. Administration Grey is dried, and we've got one last colour to apply to the hair. And of course that's his namesake, white. And White Scar is our colour. So this is just for the very ends of the hair where he is, again, going white. So thin points like the ends of his beard here. His moustache. Almost dotting the hair with it, not going on for too strong a highlight, just picking out spots here and there. And be a bit more liberal with application towards the ends of his hair. Like so. And while we've got this colour, we'll also pick out the cord hanging from his belt here. As well as the belt itself, try and get the raised details. And with that final dot of white done on the hair, Saruman's hair and his face is finished. So we have one last main area to do, and of course it's his Staff of Power. So before we go on to his staff, we're going to use Carrick Stone, and this is just to do a quick highlight on his sandals, which have already been painted with Xandri Dust and shaded with Agrix Earthshade. So we'll just get a small amount of this on the palette. And onto his sandals, we want to pick out the edges. Moving on to his actual staff, we're going to use Abaddon Black as our first colour. This is going to be, of course, for the entirety of the staff. So just being careful around his hands that we finished. So we'll start at the end here. Don't worry about the orb, we'll paint that next. So we'll just get this all over the Staff of Power. So there we go, our black is drying, and the next part we're going to want to paint is the orb at the end with Corax White. So being careful in and around the black, but we just want to try and pick out the raised areas, which will help creating shadow. So we'll get the end right here, and then we want to try and work in between the 4 points of the staff. If you do get any on the points, just come back in with some Abaddon black and tidy up. Now the white is dry, we're going to go in with a tiny bit of Nuln Oil, and we'll just shade down around the white. And then we can highlight up in a minute. While Nuln Oil is drying, we're going to start highlighting the staff. So first off is rust grey, and we're going to use this on the very upward facing parts of the staff. So top ends of the staff here and here where the light would catch. And we need to pick out the raised details around the head of the staff. And rust grey is dry, we're going to come in with Fenrisian grey. And this is going to be for a dot highlight on the very tips of the staff points and a fine line just going down the centre. On the end of the staff, we just want to get the sharpest tip there and there. Then we want a thin line inside the rust grey. We don't want to go all the way down. Just want to see. There we go. Gentle sort of gradient down from top to the bottom. We've got one last colour to do on the staff. So we're going to go back to White Scar, and again we're going to do a dot on the staff. So dot right on the tip and on the two upward facing parts of the orb. And we can even do another line inside the Fenrisian grey. Just this time about halfway down, like so. And there we go, the staff is complete. We just got one last detail to do, which is his base. So for his base, we're going to do the usual Middle-earth base that I do for all my models. So we're going to go in with a layer of stone and mud on top. So get a scoop on the large end of our tool. Onto our base. That's a bit better. And we'll flip around to our small end and spread it about, getting underneath his foot, which on my model is raised a little high. So and work it in underneath his robes as well. The texture has dried. I'm going to give it a shade of Agrax Earthshade, and I've still got some left over from that recessing we did earlier, so just going to use that. This makes it look a little darker and dirtier, perfect for the shadowy realm of Mirkwood. So work that over the texture and leave it to dry. Once the Agrax Earthshade's dry, we can dry brush over the top with some Rackar Flesh. Just picking out that raised texture. And a final detail to do requires us removing him from the paint handle, as we're going to paint the rim of the base with some Mournfang Brown. So just gently apply this to the rim of the base. There we go, Saruman the White is ready to lead the White Council in the fight against the Necromancer of Dol Guldur. So there we go, as you can see, painting figures that are portrayed or described as being white doesn't have to be as difficult and off-putting as you'd think. So as you can see, we've used bones and ivories to work up a nice light colour for the robes, and white has been used more as an accent and final highlight on areas such as the hair and his belt. So I hope you've enjoyed this video for Middle-earth March. Let me know any other models you want to see me paint. As for other models, you can use this to even paint Gandalf the White if you have that model in your collection, as they both have a very similar sort of aesthetic, though Gandalf does have more of a white finish to the robes, so a dry brush with white scar might be a better final highlight than Pallid Witch Flesh. So all that's left for me to do is to say thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on more Middle-earth March. Goodbye.